This is the Principles of War podcast, professional military education for junior officers and senior NCOs.
This is the fifth presentation in the Royal Australian Artillery Historical Company's Firepower Lessons from the Great War seminar series. This seminar is the 11th in the series and covers the Western Front, Breaching the Hindenburg Line. This is the plenary session covering the question and answers from the seminar.
I'd now like to ask the panel to move forward and take their seats with me. As they move up, I'll give a quick background brief as to each of the members. So, in alphabetical order, Major Khalid Al-Khalidi is currently a student at Australian Commander Staff College. He's a former operations officer from 1 Regiment. He's had former operational deployments as an artillery troop commander on Operation Herrick in Helmand in 2009 and as a joint fires observer for Op Slipper in Aruzga in 2011. Warrant Officer Sean Graham is beside him. He's a former Regimental Sergeant Major of 23 Regiment, RAA, and the Master Gunner of 2nd Division. He's had former operational deployments with Op Mazurka in the Sinai in 2001, as Battery Sergeant Major of 105 Battery for Op Astute in Timor-Leste in 2006, as Troop Sergeant Major for Op Herrick in Helmand in 2008, and as a RSM with the Artillery Training Team Kabul, Op Slipper in 2011. In the middle, we're joined by Dr. Malia Hampton. Mel is a historian in the military history section of the Australian War Memorial. Her doctoral thesis was on the battles of Pozières and Mouquet Farm. Her primary interest is in the operational conduct of the First World War, particularly the Western Front. In 2016, Malia published her seminal work, Attack on the Somme, the First Anzac Corps and the Battle of Pozières Ridge in 1916. On the left is Brigadier Ben James. And Ben is the Director General, Training and Doctrine Command, a former Commander 1 Brigade, a former DG Modernisation and Project for Land 400. His former operational deployments include as a military observer with UNSO, 3 tours in East Timor, including as Commander Timor-Leste Battle Group 3 in 2007-2008, and also as the Deputy Commander of Combined Team Aruzgan in 2012. Our final panel member is Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Langford. Andrew is currently the Staff Officer Grade 1 Joint Fires Army in Army Headquarters. He's a former Commanding Officer of Joint Proof and Experimental Unit, and he's had a former operational deployment as the Operations Analyst Lead within Headquarters JTF 633 in 2012-2013. So at this stage, ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to do is give the panel members an opportunity to make any comments that they would like. But then after that, what I'd like to do is to transition into a dialogue between these subject matter experts and you, the audience, who are, I consider, the near peers in relation to being practitioner experts, historian experts, and academic experts as well. So I welcome this as a dialogue between everybody, but I'd like to first give over the floor to our panel members first.
Hello everyone, Major Khalid Al-Khalidi. First I'd like to touch on Adam Rankin's brief about the improvements in prediction especially the end of World War I, and say that even though a lot of things have changed, based on our experience myself and Sean Graham's, a lot of things have stayed the same. And that on operations in Afghanistan in 2009 with British light guns, every member of the troop, specifically myself and Sean, primary responsibility was solving the barrier crime. And we were doing everything possible in accordance really with the same principles that were developed in World War I to be as accurate as possible. So that hasn't changed.
Thanks, Floyd. For those who don't know me, Sean Graham. I've been out of the Army a couple of years now. But thank you very much to Colonel Ford for the invitation to come down. I really appreciate it. And Yeah, especially the first brief, the gunnery problem still exists, and although we've come pretty close to cracking it on a consistent basis, it still comes back to bite you. And one example I'll give you is just about 95% of all guns in Helmand Province went down over a couple of day period. All the sites shut down, GPS shut down, nobody could fire. They started bringing sites in under 24 hours from the UK, and they sent that part of the gunnery problem back to some boffins at various establishments in the UK and solved it within about 36 hours. And it was quite a simple solution, but that gunnery problem came back to bite us, and it could have got very dangerous. And the other point that I saw in the first one was the dedication that Fourth Army was putting into the counter-battery fire. We did put a lot of effort into counter-battery fire in Helmand Province in terms of if any indirect or rocket appeared, we would go to great lengths in terms of trying to destroy those assets because of the damage they were doing to friendly forces. When we first started with our counter-battery, we were an absolute disgrace. And as we progressed through the time, our response time, our system got a lot better to the point that we were able to have a good crack at getting the mortars and rockets. Thank you.
The other end of the scale of human history, not any present. That working? Anyway. So the one thing I would say about the course of the conduct of the First World War is the most marked thing, I think, is the level of preparation. There was lack of preparedness for conducting warfare in a static trench system versus what they were able to do by 1918. And some British historians have talked about this as a learning curve, and then we have a tendency as historians to throw that entire term out because, in the words of Robert Pryor and Kurt Wilson, if there was a learning curve, it was an astonishingly uneven one. But I think there is still merit in thinking about that, no more so than in the role of the artillery, because technologically I think the artillery development actually does describe a really neat curve. They went from expecting to drag pom-poms around the flanks of their enemies to being able to fire very sophisticated counter-battery fire and barrages and all the things we've been hearing about tonight. There are other problems that are not an easy curve. How effectively your Corps Commander might use his artillery for if there's an obvious place. But there is learning processes that are going on constantly in the artillery. It's really important to start understanding that in the First World War.
I think in terms of lessons learned, and I can certainly speak from a capability perspective in terms of how that's manifesting itself in terms of how we're moving forward from here onwards. The team and I at Army Headquarters are focusing on various aspects of the capability. One, I'll just start with his ammunition, because we all know it's about ammunition. There's various projects that are currently underway with improving the lethality within the 81mm spectrum, which we're responsible for. And moving forward from that, with traditional 155, going out to ranges of +60 to 70 Ks. From around about that 75K range, we're looking at introducing rockets and taking that out with missiles out to about 300 Ks. So we can talk about platforms and delivery systems, but at the end of the day, it's all about ammunition and effects we can generate. And while we don't have necessarily all that capability at the moment, those capabilities is something that the team and I are responsible for, and we should get some.
But team, as I think the lone infantryman in the room today, I probably should feel a little bit nervous in a community of gunners and academics, but I actually feel strangely at ease. Nick, I'll just say from the outset what an extraordinary series you've run to hear that summary you ran through. 11 seminars of this nature, feeling supported by a strong community of gunners led from the front. General Ford here, General Stevens here, Head of Corps here. This is exactly the sort of professional body we want to have coming together for a number of reasons, certainly reflecting on where we've been, but also having some input into a pretty significant period of change that only is not starting to chart, is probably mid-stride in now. So we're orchestrating a seminar and a series of seminars of this nature of the areas you've covered, mate. Well done to you and Craig and the team for pulling this together. Certainly from a trade-like perspective, you can absolutely see cause to speak with one voice, that come together to think about these things deeply, to speak with a common voice. You can tell where they're going in the future with their trades, with their training, as opposed to those who don't do that quite as well. So well done for a fantastic contribution, mate. And I just think this seminar and the support you've had here from an enormous amount of experience, those who've gone before us, historians like Roger Lee, of course contemporary gunners that have got on the stage here, I just think it's fantastic. So keep going. When Nick asked me to come along to speak here, I did had an opportunity to do a little bit of research at the War Memorial. And for me, in terms of taking lessons from this particular seminar, and I think seminars previously as well, you get drawn to that extraordinary painting by Will Longstaff. It's actually called The Breaching of the Hindenburg Line. A great piece of canvas, Mark 5 tanks emerging out of the shattered spires behind the town. Diggers standing amongst casualties, amongst captured prisoners, so that sense of confusion about what would happen in the close fight. Of course, breaking on the high ground, on the back of the canvas, the guns clearly firing in support. You really do get a sense of what that is all about, that combined arms sense of what needed to happen at a critical juncture in the First World War at the end of 1918, as they sought to close the entire war before the onset of winter and get on with that. So that painting to me captures a lot of the lessons that we've spoken about and need to be drawn out in a seminar that speaks about breaking of the Hindenburg Line. Like our young veterans here, I also draw the point talking about lessons, not so much what is changing, although we are absolutely in a period of change, and not too many corps at the centre of Northern Artillery, what's coming up, but also what stays the same. And when you think about the state of the Australian Corps when they were fighting to break the Hindenburg Line, late September, early October, fighting for about 6 months straight, all the way from Hamel through some really substantial battles, and some commentary from Monash and his senior leaders that we heard today, and some of the presentations from Jason as well, about just how much fatigue was setting in, how tired they were, and just that really important quality of resilience and being able to fight through at a really key juncture of a war of that scale. So enormous fatigue, enormous numbers of casualties churned out since the Battle of Amiens, only 2 months, I think, before the breaking of the Hindenburg Line. So those qualities, the calibre of the people that were called upon to take this action, just simply extraordinary in my view. The other key lesson, of course, again, we learn this year in, year out, is integration, of course, with our key coalition partners. I think Jason referred to the presence of the American Second Corps fighting under Monash at the breaking of the Hindenburg Line. Certainly energetic, certainly brought a lot of horsepower to the fight, not a lot of experience. So Mike Nyberg, an amazing US historian specialising in the First World War, a lecturer of mine at the United States Army War College, an enormous source of information on this, writes about Monash, recognising that, certainly appreciating the Americans fighting side by side, but every US company having an Australian senior NCO or officer in their line to make sure they knew what was about to occur, improve that liaison and communication and coordination between the two nationalities, and of course Second Corps primarily, US Second Corps primarily focused on some of the initial objectives breaking into the Hindenburg Line, which the Australians then exploited through to get on with that. So that coalition interoperability, how you affect that, the importance of liaison officers, what you ask your less experienced coalition partners to do. Again, lessons that we learn year and year again. I'm sure we'll learn it again next year when we see our American friends over here for things like Talisman Sabre as well. So yes, we are in a substantial period of change. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I think some of those lessons that were drawn out really important for us to reflect on as well. So great seminar, great initiative, Nick. Look forward to the questions from the team.
Thanks, sir.
Now throw the ball over to the audience. We've got a pretty good repertoire of experts here. So it's nice to anybody to ask a question or venture an opinion from one you've either heard today or something you've heard from one of the previous seminars so far.
G'day everyone, my name is Edward Jackson. Thanks again for reiterating my background and acting as a leadership, all those that have organised the seminar and supported it. Can I ask about in the panel's view, is that the most leading example of the German action or a German development or technology or a tactic that caused the greatest change to the use of Allied artillery in the First World War, but that they impact anything at all? Thank you.
Probably for Mel first, I think. But also for any historians out there in the audience as well, if you'd like to draw our own, and please do as well.
The short answer actually is trying to outflank the British. The formation of the trench lines on the Western Front are actually a problem that takes years to undo. And they are the fact that the British and French infantry aren't able to flank their opponents like they were expected to do is not something anyone had prepared for, and that is what, dealing with that situation, that lack of movement, is what the artillery are dealing with all through 1916, all through 1917 and into 1918. So all the Germans had to do was come in and keep digging trenches, and they are in foreign territory. They've technically won quite a bit of ground, including some really great coal mines, and they don't need to do any more. And it's the onus is on the Allies to dig them out. The way they start with their artillery is really rudimentary. They fight over which battery gets the tree so that their observer can see what's going on, and it becomes more and more sophisticated as time goes on. But that the level of sophistication that builds up is one that has taken years of constant attention. And aside from conducting immediate counterattacks and a major operation at Verdun, the Germans don't do anything else. They're doing full-scale rail raids. They're doing a lot of stuff at Verdun, which is against, using forts and quite different warfare. And then until the spring offensive in 1918, they don't have to do anything because they attack France and they're technically. To continue on then, when the Germans do something in early 1918, and they are using a lot of artillery, but what they are using more importantly are their men. They haven't been doing these attempts to move that the British and the French have been doing. They're attempting to push the line, and originally they're attempting to bust the line open and pour your men through and outflank people. They learn that that's not feasible when the line's 10 miles deep. So they're learning to push the line and push your way in and stop and push your way in. They're learning different approaches. The Germans aren't, and they're still thinking we've got to bust our way through and we're going to get to Paris and we're going to win the war. So they throw all of them into it. They have storm troops, they are manpower centric and focused on reinstating more movement. And if you contrast that with the offensive that won the war, from Amiens onwards, pushing, stop, get set, push, stop, get set, push. They never break through, they never try to break through, but they are quite prepared with the liberal application of American infantry to push Germans back to Berlin, and that's the difference. So, in short, digging trenches, in long, two very different running paths.
Would anyone else like to contribute to what I think is a really great question?
I'm actually fully in agreement with Malia. But building on from Malia, I think the key issue for artillery in this war is the conundrum that it faces. You don't get the sophisticated heavy artillery and all the sophisticated command and control systems unless you have a trench system. Because the biggest problem in 1914 was the biggest and heaviest gun you could pull on a battlefield was the 50 pounder. anything bigger than that had to be garrison artillery and then fort, because you couldn't move it. So as long as you've got trenches, you can put heavy guns in. Then of course mobile warfare returned in 1918. How do you move these ones? Don't. Which is why when we talk about Monty Graham, we're back to, guess what, 60 pounders and light field guns. I think the biggest problem for the artillery is learning how to change and adapt the changing face of the battlefield. And I think the big story of the First World War is it does this quite quickly. When you consider the position of British artillery in 1914 or even 1915, it was very unsophisticated and particularly fairly light. By 1918, it's incredibly sophisticated, had a full range of solutions, everything from a light mortar to a 16-inch, well, they actually had two 18 inches on railway carriages that came out. So they could supply a specific solution to a specific military problem. From where I sit, I think that's by far and away the biggest achievement of the Allied artillery. The French had the same, the Germans did for exactly the reasons you said.
I'd just like to offer a comment on the leader, saying that the Germans didn't adopt this right and hold or quite push thing. And the reason, in my mind, the reason they didn't do that is they couldn't do that because they had neither the manpower nor the industrial resource to resort to that sort of battle. They had to break through. They had to achieve a strategic result or fail. And they failed, obviously, but they, if you read Colonel Bushmiller's book, he talks about breakthrough battles, and he critiques of his tactics by saying, we could not adopt right and hold. We did not have the resources. We had to break through. We had to achieve a strategic result. And in a sense, the sort of blitzkrieg tactic adopted by another war later is the same thinking applied on all those to go.
That's one of those, that's really interesting, because that's one of those situations where they are saying one thing and they're doing another. Like, they're done, we're going to beat the French right, but we just want to take that ground over there and advance over there. You know, like they're saying one thing and they're doing another. He's saying they don't have the resources to do it, but someone is throwing resources at small-scale counterattacks on a daily basis and sending it into the field. If they had stopped and recessed slowly, they could have a rifle. I wouldn't believe him. But maybe not on the scale that the Allies could do in 1980, but if you put the resources that they put into their daily counterattacks on a 20-40 mile front, they could have done anything. They just couldn't have done it at all. We might throw them.
Perhaps there's a lesson for every commander and staff officer out there that you can do anything as long as your priorities. Can I tempt anybody for another question?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Major James Casey. I work across at Russell. My question is for virtually all of the panel. Currently, in the way that we train our young combat corps officers, artillerymen in particular, our regimental training stops at, for young officers, the junior to mid-captain level, and for our warrant officers at the sub-corps for warrant officer, where they're dealing really with the regimental environment, and for the officers they begin exposure to their operations as an operations officer in a brigade. Given that we're reinvigorating the joint task force at the divisional level and how it is that plugs into American Corps, for example, do we consider that that's appropriate for where we sit now? Or do we think that there's perhaps an opportunity using media like Moodle, for example, for us to continue to develop that? And I'm interested, Khalid, in your perspectives from Staff College and Sir, from your experience as training.
Okay, so I see you're talking about some kind of course prior to Battery Command Operations Officer, similar to the old BC's course many years ago. Well, I agree with you in part because every combat brigade is in a different cycle. Not all operations officers and Battery Commanders get a chance to work at that higher level. Some get an opportunity to do the advanced warfighter in the States, work with an Australian brigade within a US division and achieve that exposure to core level targeting, divisional level targeting boards and all that. Some don't. So potentially some kind of exposure to a course at senior captain or junior major level, that core sort of US style divisional headquarters.
There we go, James. It's a really good question. The first comment that I'd offer is I wouldn't be wedded to the only training we do occurs in our schoolhouse. I think the learning and your growth and your opportunities, in fact, in a lot of ways, happen well outside the schoolhouse. And what we're asking our brigades to do now, what they're exposed to, not just through Hamels and Talbot Sabres, but pretty routinely through the training year, is absolutely at the centre of the training, the experience and the education and the growth that we're talking about. So don't limit your thinking and your understanding of how we train and develop our officers to that. There's a whole lot more that goes on. There's a whole lot more to come too. I think when we see what the team are turning their mind to in accelerated warfare, in where the chief sees the army going, the role of army. Cooperation, competition, conflict, persistence, lethality, those things go to the core of army. In a lot of ways, they go to the core of artillery corps. So I think the opportunity to learn and grow are absolutely outside the schoolhouse. I would absolutely take that question you posed as you turn your mind to your employment category reviews, what we ask the corps to do with different ranks, and feed that into it. We are Army, and it manifests itself in the trade-off organisation. We are wrestling with systems that try to change our workforce, our trades, our skills that are designed for an Army in Greens and SLRs and 77 sets. And almost every part of our Army now is going through such a fast turn of what we're asking our people to do, our corps to deliver, our trades to deliver. We just can't keep up with that formal sense of changing those trades and structures. So when you're head of corps and you get together for your corps conferences and turn their mind to those employment category review changes, pack that question in there and think critically about what sort of training we want to be able to do. The third area I'd say is again about thinking about some of those trades, and our training is there's a couple of corps that are probably going to be deeply affected by this. Artillery is probably one of them. Our relationship with industry. I think what we're going to see turned up in 1907 Bravo, Army will move into integrated air missile defence for the first time. This is not future land warfare. This is probably in the next 8 months or so. We'll have a pretty good idea of what the solution pattern is going to be, and it's probably going to be it's going to be a great outcome and a great solution for it. I had the great privilege of getting up and catching up with 16 Air Land Regiment at Delamere earlier in the year. Some amazingly bright young soldiers already immersed in some of the radar technology that the CEA is talking about, already asking to go and do industry placements that understand that technology, how it can best be applied. And we heard lessons about harnessing technology and adapting in some of the presentations we had here today. So I would be pushing into those areas in terms of our learning and our training and our understanding, as well as our courses that are good, and we're trying to change those. COAC right now is rolling out for the first time BMS, so that our schoolhouses are trying to plan and fight the way we do in brigades. So that takes time, it takes bandwidth, it takes money, and we're not really blessed with those in most parts of Army at the moment. So think widely, get involved in those employment category reviews, what our trade structures are, and how we train people to get there. It's going to be a pretty substantial period of change. Yeah.
Just to add to that too, James, while they're limited in terms of they're not formal exchanges but exposure for our officers to some of these activities, we had just sent OPSO for Reg over for a future joint warfare planning activity over in the US. So he's come back with that experience, and we're hoping that he'll obviously pass that through the regiment. We're just gearing up for a series, if you might have heard, or some of the audience might have heard of Bulk Quest. So previous Bulk Quest, we've had quite a significant delegation from 16 ALR attend that. Next year, Bulk Quest 19.1 will be in Finland. and it will be quite a significant, yes, it will be quite a significant presence that we have at that as well. We're also looking at more formal exchanges through the Centre of Excellence at Fort Sill, with attendance on the course there, and one of the opportunities we're looking at there is for master gunners, CP sergeants and that kind of thing to be able to attend courses there, again to be able to bring back some of that experience. So while that is more formal, it's very much under that exchange umbrella, and that's something that we're exploring with CASG at the moment. So while unfortunately there's not enough of that to go around to everybody, we're always constantly looking for those type of opportunities where formal training ends to try and build up on through experience.
Can I just have a crack at answering that as well too? James, that's a great question. It's exactly the same question I asked down at the School of Artillery a week ago. We were a combined gathering of ROGS Force, COAC and Joint Fire KFT Commanders Force body. And it's the thing that concerns me the most as head of Britain, I must say. And notwithstanding the comments made by the panel about all these other opportunities that are out there, they are excellent opportunities, and they're opportunities that perhaps we didn't enjoy quite the same way in the past. Although I do recall as a young lieutenant going and doing exercises in Hawaii and all of those kinds of things. But the opportunities we do get now are great. But I am concerned there is not a specific course anymore that delivers what we need for officers to be able to, in the RAA, to function at the divisional and above level. And it's a bit hit and miss. We've got some guys that have gone across and done things in CFLIX and other places on operations, and they've acquitted themselves very, very well. But I spent a month on the Korean Peninsula earlier this year where we were manoeuvring nothing less than a division, and in most days we were manoeuvring corps. And there is a real art to managing the indirect fire and the SDA conundrum in that kind of environment. And my view is I think we need to take a long, hard look at the COAC, which I think we've created a situation where we become combined arms officers, and not enough specialists in our own corps or our own environment with the ability to understand how that contributes to the combined arms effect and how to work with the other. So I think that is the concern I have, and I know Ben and I have spoken about this before, and we can fix it, but the bottom line is, I don't think we are preparing our battery commanders correctly anymore, and certainly above that, I don't think we are preparing people to be COs if they're going to be plugged in as a regimental commander inside a US division, inside a ROC US Corps.
And certainly a little bit of commentary to that. Certainly my own experience last year working in the JFIC OIR, headquarters working with Chief Hotel with their divisional artillery and their division of joint fires through the strikes that were there, demonstrated that yes, while we had exchange officers, embedded officers working up into that divisional artillery construct, they were learning at a rapid rate in the first couple of months. We had excellent people who were there, but they weren't prepared for it. They learned and they came away now. We may not have that luxury of that latitude of the US Divisional Artillery assets now to sponsor the Australian job with our initial march. Also, I guess there's opportunities for long-term two-year exchange positions, which could also assist in those short-term training. My interesting words and another question here.
So we've all heard the phrase of everything old is new again, and there's a tendency for old lessons to be forgotten at some point in history, convoys between the First and Second World War, for example. Is there anything from the First World War that's been rediscovered or reapplied in the last 15 years where we've been around the world?
You get to see what's under the box.
Well,
still like
yeah, a really simple example is, in the last 12 months we've reintroduced Met systems into our regiments. People are hailing that as a great success. I reckon it's a travesty. The fact that we did away with them in the first place. So a very simple lesson. We talk about the gunnery problem, and I'm really, really pleased to hear people talking about the gunnery problem. It's music to my ears. You can't solve the gunnery problem permanently. It's always in motion. So you've got to keep working at it, and you can't just solve it and then move on. You've got to keep revisiting it. So all of those things. So Met, I am really concerned. I mean, it's the first I've heard the story there from Troy about GPS going down in Helmand Province and the fact that the guns were all down for sort of 96 hours. That should have been solvable then and there on the spot with redundant systems. So how do we cope in the future? My day job is the Director General Plans at Joint Operations Command, so I think about the world and how we might fight in that world, and the things that concern me are how do you fight in a contested electromagnetic spectrum environment? How do you do it when GPS is denied? How do you do it when all your systems are cyber attacked? And so that's what worries me. The systems that we use take so much time to train that there's not enough time left to train a redundant system, and they're very complex. So they are the challenges we face. But Met, survey, those sorts of things from First World War, we're really learning those lessons and reapplying them in the regional study.
Just to add to that, so it's that corporate knowledge that as we get new technology, which takes more time to train on, that we potentially have a risk of losing. And the British Army had changed the visual system about 10 years before us. We went over there, and because we were more seniors, we used to do everything with the dial side and everything else. It's just some of those more old school lessons that we had that we could actually fly faster and be more accurate in support of British and coalition troops. Little things like hearing troops in contact, they haven't got a call for fire yet, changing your center of arc towards that so you don't have to move flight terminals. Checking charges every half an hour when the temperature in Afghanistan rises and falls pretty rapidly instead of just going for what the band says. All these little things that you need to know the principles of counter-prediction and not just the drill or technical computer set. So that's what I'm concerned that as we get more technology, those old school principles are starting to wear out as people apply.
In terms of some of those lessons learned, another one the head of regiment mentioned about the Met. One of the other considerations to look at is weapon locating radar, particularly to augment that long fires capability that I referred to earlier. So that's another one for any of the 131 did-lot guys and girls that might be in the audience here this evening. It's interesting about the GPS. We became very reliant on that type of technology in terms of some of the guidance systems associated with some of these extended range missions. We're very mindful of that, and we are constantly considering the ramifications of working in a GPS degraded, with a better GPS benign environment in terms of how that's then going to manifest. In terms of some of those ammunition systems now that rely on that heavily that we've become so used to. So yes, it is very much an issue. I'm not saying we've got all the answers yet, but we're very cognizant of moving forward with those considerations. So it's fine, you get used to it and it works really well. You develop that technology and then there's defeat mechanisms for it. And funny enough, we're going back to or looking for different ways to solve that current issue.
I would like to say, as the student chief in front of senior officers, there was one thing that I would hope, and I fully expect to see this today, is going on. In 1918, Australia sent a civilian army, they were volunteers, and it was sent over, but by 1918 they are very much professionals, and they are strongly encouraged to talk with each other and develop their professional ideas amongst each other, from platoon commanders through their company commanders all the way through. And that goes to artillery officers. They are deliberately put put in positions where they have to hang out with balloonists to make sure that they trust their observation. They are deliberately put in place these tanks so that the infantry get put in these tanks so they trust them and they work with them. And they're encouraged to socialise and discuss ideas with each other as professionals in a professional army, and it's massively beneficial in 1918 at all levels and all the different arms. So, yeah, get on it, sort yourselves out, Jesus.
It's good check on the money. It's a really good question, and it's something that we are turning our mind to in a big way. Adam spoke in his presentation about the individual ways of looking at intelligence and counter-battery fires in the seminar context. We know now after the last couple of exercises, the big exercises we've run, the biggest factor that slows down our decision making in a contested decision action cycle is the number of sensors that we have coming into one node, normally a headquarters somewhere, and our ability to process that, deal with that, analyse that, and then decide on that subsequently. So next year, for the first time, one of the key outcomes from Talent Same will be starting to identify key areas where we are going to start inserting things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, where will an army and defence force of our size get the biggest bang for the buck if and when we start inserting that sort of technology to get after it. So we're alive to it. The wheels do turn pretty slow. I think that's also driving a much different relationship with industry. Aviation has been there for some time. Gunners also, I think what we're seeing in some of the dome simulators also is starting to see green shoots of relationship with industry. We know from some of the training that we're seeing with rework with even listing our land range safety, the type and nature and sophistication of training delivered by our industry partners couldn't be delivered in a decade by people that we have in uniform. So I think that entire relationship with industry, what we ask them to do, how we incorporate that innovation, we're going to see more and more of it with some of these changes we're seeing coming into the IRP and how we see our operating environment, where we know we're weak.
I'm going to be a real spoiler, and I'm going to have to say that with a little bit of time left in this discussion, I would love it to have gone on for another hour, but I know we're all places to go. And I asked the two people about what questions to ask them in closing.
I was about to jump on the bandwagon and respond to that a little bit and just give some contemporary information about what I'm doing in space. But if people ask questions, I'll
a quick comment from there, and then up to Luke, and then we'll just have to draw the Q&A to a close, and sort of, otherwise we won't be able to really for him to be prepared for a week.
My name is Major Nick Allen. I'm in SO2 working on headquarters, and my job this year is to think about a lot of these issues. As Leah, and any historian would say, history rhymes. And it does occur throughout the day about the lessons that we learned back in the First World War and the whole nuclear fire problem involved. There are a lot of parallels I see right now with where things are. As Australian artillery, as opposed to the other Western Force artillery, we have withdrawn into ourselves, just dealt with techniques and the basic problem of firing guns. I think we've passed the inflection point now where, and you see this with the way the Russians have rediscovered their line of artillery. Of all the sensors that are out there in the battlefield, problems have changed in terms of the fact that the ranges that we're dealing with are far beyond our ability to organically observe and correct them. So we just changed. But some of the things that I would refer to that we need to move and are moving into, seismic sensors, maybe flash, certainly acoustic, weapon locating radar. As an enterprise, as an artillery enterprise, and I'll probably say this a little bit in terms of, with respect to the fact that we're not having conferences here, so there's probably one opportunity to sort of influence the wider crowd. We need to re-specialise again. The comment was made a little bit earlier. We need to embrace that, we need to sell that message. It's too hard to try and be all things to everyone, and we need to restream, but still maintain that connection as an artillery enterprise to deliver a joint effect.
Brother Luke, please, on that. That's a good question.
An observation on the question that you asked about things that have been used then disappeared and have been come back. My name is Luke Carroll, I work with the Bishop of Sydney and Baltimore. This morning my colleague, Bill Gray, who's actually writing the chapter on Hellman, he had a photograph on his screen and I couldn't notice the absence of the splinter shield on the gun. We had a bit of a conversation about that, and the thing that comes from that, I suppose, is that the splinter shield disappeared from the gun. But we adapted it in a way. We'd actually put the splinter shield on the man through body armor. Who made mention that in the earlier, and great figures in the comment on that was, in the early rotations of the Corps man, they didn't wear body armor, but in the later rotations they did, because there was some casualties, British casualties through splinters, advanced landing, ultimately guns. So just the point, the splinter shields have disappeared, they go off a bit of the gun.
I'll leave this to Sean to come and give a right.
Yep, that is one. Yep, in Helmand, most of our engagements were extremely close to the guns. Our gun numbers were exposed directly to direct fire, small arms and so on. To that end, when we first got into theatre, so we replaced 2-9 Regiment as 40 Regiment, and at that stage 2-9 Regiment were wearing body armour, and when our guys got in, we made the decision that if we had a direct threat, we would wear body armour, and then British CO 40 Regiment came out and said, no, we don't get the entire, every battery is going to wear it every mission, because it was, the threat level was very high. So, yeah.
Just to add to that, in previous deployments, Nick Nixon created the first rotation that went over. Their engagements were a little bit further out, so the risk of small arms fire coming back into the FOB from that contact was not as great. We were firing between 900 metres to sort of 1.5 kilometres out of normal engagement. And it was actually the stray rounds from the contact that were supporting coming back over the fog. So that's why we had to wear body armour, because we found first couple missions whilst firing the guns and rocks were skipping off excellent. So it was actually, less from split defence but more from stray rounds, and we were also very exposed because as we were having to fire closer and closer, we could move the wire, let the guns higher to be able to fire over the wall. So the guy's waist was exposed to the green zone where they can't see him. So that's the reason why we was there. I think it's staying after following conversations.
Alright. As I said before, I'm going to have to do a spoiler for my own party. In order to give the final segments some voice, I'd like to draw this seminar discussion to a close. Can I please ask you to join with me in thanking our very distinguished panel, Khalid, Nali, Mel, Andrew, for the event. Thank you very much.
The Principles of War podcast is brought to you by James Ealing. The show notes for the Principles of War podcast are available at www.theprinciplesofwar.com for maps, photos and other information that didn't make it into the podcast. Follow us on Facebook or tweet us at Surprise Podcast. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes and tag a mate in on one of our episodes. All opinions expressed by individuals are those of those individuals and not of any organisation.